After waiting for so long, it can be hard to know what to expect. But right out of the gate, and for almost the entire game, the Final Fantasy VII Remake makes a statement. It delivers a message loud and clear. Welcome back to Midgar. Now when someone asks me, what sort of things do you like in a video game? I can point at something and say, pretty much all of this. The reason I think this remake hits the mark as hard as it does is because, while it stays relatively true to the design of the original, it places an equal focus on its own merits as a game. It doesn't solely exist to pay tribute to what came before, despite doing so tremendously well. And I wanted to make a video on why this is seriously important for the series as a whole. There's a certain trifecta of qualities that this game absolutely nails, specifically music, gameplay, and characters. Music tends to be a pretty subjective thing, but this is honestly some of the best I've heard in a video game ever. Much of the soundtrack is incredibly atmospheric. Underneath the Rotting Pizza once again perfectly encompasses the gritty nature of life in Midgar. Those Chosen by the Planet is just as chilling as ever, and Haunted has this distinct PS1 vibe to it, reminiscent of games like Parasite Eve and Resident Evil. My only issue with any of this music is that some of it feels like it belongs in 13 far more than 7. But considering this only applies to a small portion of the soundtrack, which is mostly comprised of absolutely fantastic themes both new and old, this tiny negative is basically eclipsed by positives. Similarly to 15, you can collect various music tracks, all unique remixes made for the jukeboxes you can find. And there's honestly a surprising amount of variation between the genres of each, from jazz and waltz to pop and hip-hop. Another detail that can be easy to overlook is the fact that in many areas of the game, the music playing will seamlessly shift into a battle variant when combat starts up, and some of these tracks make for some surprisingly great battle themes. In terms of gameplay, the remake feels amazing. It controls like an absolute dream with some of the best real-time combat I've experienced, outmatched only by games like Devil May Cry 5, and even then it comes damn close for me in regards to sheer enjoyment. It keeps you constantly engaged, combat is just as flashy as the cutscenes themselves. In fact, this game goes to extreme lengths to frequently make gameplay and cutscenes flow together seamlessly, which is astounding in and of itself. The way the ATB system functions adds an entire layer of strategy to the combat. You often need to think about what you're doing and make the most of your gauge, and switching between characters is a lot of fun. They'll make use of unique abilities they gain through each of their weapons, which they can keep permanently after using them enough, which I especially love because that's basically how it worked in Final Fantasy IX. The best one. The fight against Hell House is one of my favourites because it was the point where I was forced to adapt and strategize. And that feeling really brought me back to the trickier fights of the original game. There's a lot of incentive to think things through, and the end result is a satisfying combat system that rewards planning ahead and tactical thought. In terms of controls, I absolutely love how Cloud and the others feel to play as. The issues I once mentioned in regards to 15's combat are gone, and you always have full control over your attacks and actions. Characters react immediately, and controls are tight. All good stuff here. Also, if the flying enemies could just go ahead and backflip into a coffin, that'd be great. There's a solid amount of stuff to do throughout Midgar, and the setting itself feels alive with the various people, side quests, and expansive areas you'll come across. The number of side quests on offer felt like a good balance to me. Not too few, but not so many that I felt bogged down or lost patience with keeping myself away from the main story. Finding new materia feels just as exciting as it did in the original, and much of it even functions in exactly the same way, or at least similarly. Technically speaking, this is a linear game with spots that open up a little more, much like the original, and that's honestly a good thing. It allows the game to keep a consistent pace and focus, which really helps the character development over the course of the story feel natural. And on that note, I really want to talk about the characters and their personalities because this is without a doubt the most important part of the entire remake for me. Despite having remake in the title, this game doesn't follow the blueprint exactly. It takes an increasing number of liberties in order to tell not just a unique story, but specifically a good story. The reason this is so important is that it feels like the human element of Final Fantasy has been returned to it. I cried a lot while playing through the remake, often during moments I already knew were coming from the start. I also laughed far more than I was expecting. There's a lot of really well delivered humor peppered throughout.
Wait a minute. Cloud? Is that you? Oh my god, that makeup! And that dress!
Nailed it, I know, thank you. Moving on.
This game is, in my opinion, the most human Final Fantasy game we've gotten in the past 2 decades. I cannot understate how good these characters are. It's easy to form a genuine connection to most of them, not simply because many of them are returning favourites, but because their various traits and quirks are doubled down on with some brilliant dialogue and exchanges.
I thought you were just doing it for fun.
I suppose some people do.
Hello, I'm some people. Nice to meet you.
Cloud's dry wit and aloof attitude is all showcased in his banter with Barret and various chats with the locals.
Shinra knows better than to stick its nose in my boss's business.
Like I give a shit.
And it's honestly nice to see everyone simply talking about a number of things they never really had the chance to in the original game. This is easily the best interpretation we've had of these characters so far, one that makes full use of the freedom available to explore who they are while remaining grounded and real enough to feel genuine. This element is capitalized upon in such a way that is entirely exclusive to the remake. The story hits all the beats you'd expect it to, but it vastly elaborates and builds upon them, allowing for a much greater insight into the characters involved. I love this game for all the same qualities I mentioned back in my Magic of Final Fantasy VII video, along with a bunch of new qualities. Probably the biggest mark against the original game was purely its presentation, which is now easily one of its strongest aspects. The world feels so huge now, and everything is so detailed even from a far distance. Seeing the countless houses below while heading to the Sector 5 reactor while hearing about the artificial suns used to provide light to those below really drove home the scale of the situation and how terrible its circumstances are. I love this stuff. The attention to detail does wonders for how immersive Midgar is here. The atmosphere was probably the original game's most defining aspect, and it returns here in spades. Something that really helps is the chatter from various NPCs that make the world feel real. They all offer various different perspectives throughout the game, and their dialogue can be mundane in a way that feels believable. They talk about their families, their jobs, and their lives like normal people. Honestly, the writing as a whole is fantastic and lends itself to a lot of nice, subtle touches throughout the game, along with some incredibly emotionally resonant moments.
I guess we'll build another bar.
Yeah. We will. You'll help too, won't you?
For a price.
This is the biggest reason I love these games so much. No other video game I've played is capable of tapping into such raw emotion as these games are. They don't make me feel the things these games do, and that quality is back in full force. Now obviously, this remake is only one part, a portion of the whole experience. But even so, the fact that it makes up an entire game on its own without simply feeling like a small slice of what should have been a bigger product is great, and the sheer quality of what's on offer here leaves me incredibly excited to see more. I'm also glad this will bring in a number of new fans, because this is a great starting point to dive into, as it really showcases some of the greatest strengths of the series as a whole. There's also the matter of the ending, but there is a lot to get into there, so that's gonna have to wait for the next video. While there are some additions I could do without, like Chadley, this game is basically firing on all cylinders. It's a shining example of what a modern Final Fantasy game can be, which, for me, is overwhelmingly satisfying. It feels good to know that the series can reclaim its former strengths and make just as much of an impact as it used to. It's seriously brought fans together in ways I haven't seen for a long time. Everyone is talking about the fight with Hell House, the big dancing scene, the motorbike sequences, and the phenomenal soundtrack. People are swapping secrets and comparing strategies. The age-old war of Aerith versus Tifa rages once more, now Jesse's even in there too. And those who love to dig deep into the lore have a lot to discuss in regards to the subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, hints that something much deeper is at play here. I have a lot more to say about the remake, but this first part of the story has, in my opinion, absolutely knocked it out of the park. Now I just gotta live long enough to see the rest of them. Thanks for watching. The second part of this video is in the works, so stay tuned. And in the meanwhile, I have a number of other videos about Final Fantasy you might enjoy. If you liked the video, feel free to subscribe or just let me know your thoughts in the comments. You can follow me on Twitter, and if you'd like to support my channel, you can either subscribe to my Patreon or donate directly via PayPal. Links can be found in the description below. Have a great day. I'll catch you next time.